Good Sunday morning, Northeast Ohio, and a very happy Mother's Day to all as we celebrated in a way a year ago few of us could have imagined. A big week ahead, though, as the responsible restart rollout continues, with more consumer retail and service going back to limited operations on Tuesday. Then Friday, restaurants can open with outdoor seating, and personal care services, mainly hair care, can resume operations. Then May 21st, restaurants can serve patrons inside, provided they meet the social distance guidelines laid out. Some say this is too fast. Others say it's not fast enough, including a group of Republican lawmakers who want to limit the powers of Health Director Dr. Amy Acton. When Governor Mike DeWine wanted to change the date of the Ohio primary last month, he couldn't under the state's constitution, but the state's health director, Dr. Amy Acton, could and did. By statute, she has the ability to make special or standing orders or rules for preventing the spread of contagious or infectious diseases.
There's been an epic abuse of power.
Ohio State Representative John Becker from outside Cincinnati wants to put an end to it. He introduced last week a bill titled Now, Need Ohio Working, that would make Dr. Acton's orders recommendations that the General Assembly would then have to vote up or down.
It's time to stop the madness. I think a lot of people thought that, this would run through the end of April, then beginning of May.
But he told me it's going on too long, and he's convinced the state is on the downside of this curve, so there's no reason in his mind why the state shouldn't reopen.
So, does that mean there's going to be potentially, more virus, more infections and more deaths? Well, sure. But, we have, deaths from swimming pools and bathtubs and highway accidents, too. So, we can't protect everybody from everything.
Those examples, though, are not exactly things that are contagious. The governor's office tells me that if this or any other piece of legislation comes across his desk that seeks to limit the powers of the health director at this time, he will veto it. Well, that may have been the easier part of the governor's week. The tougher part came Tuesday when he had to take the scissors out and cut $775 million out of the state budget in order to fill an equally big hole. The state might have a $69.8 billion biennial budget, but the reality is they are just the middleman for most of the money. More than 85% of it goes out in checks to schools, higher education, Medicaid, and local government.
So most of the budget does not get spent on state agencies.
It's different at the local level. They spend what they take in, and those governments are also facing a similar shortfall in income and other tax revenue. The one bright spot has been aid in the early phases of the CARES Act that has come to Ohio. $3.74 billion to the state as a whole, $215 million to Cuyahoga County. But
that money is very, very limited in how it can be used.
If you have a direct COVID-19 expense, you can use the money to cover it.
But you can't use it for an indirect expense, which is a result of reduced revenue, which is a result of the reduced economy, which is the result of the coronavirus.
That's something Ohio Senators Rob Portman and Sherrod Brown are asking Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin to change because one of the big expenses at the local level is public safety.
I'm talking, directly to some of the police departments and EMS personnel, mostly firefighters, about this because when they're looking at cuts of 20 to 30%, they've actually got to cut public safety. And that's the last thing you want to do right now during this crisis.
We continue to push Mnuchin to fix this. If he doesn't, it will be in the next Recovery Act, and we will make it retroactive so the money that's already out there can be spent the way cities and counties want to.
Otherwise, he said, we would be looking at a new wave of municipal layoffs down the road that would only add a greater burden to the already overtaxed state unemployment system. One group of Ohio workers that has been working steadily throughout this whole process has been the state's farmers. But as I found this week, it doesn't mean they haven't been impacted by this pandemic. When last we visited with Portage County farmer Chuck Sayre at harvest time last fall, his family had a difficult decision to make. Did they stick with the soybeans they had primarily planted for 30 years, a market devastated by the trade war with China, or switch to mainly corn? 7 months later,
we're still deciding. We were talking with our seed salesman here yesterday, as a matter of fact. We're still making changes.
That's because corn is no longer the safer bet it looked like in the fall, and that is a direct result of the pandemic.
A big market for corn is ethanol. And now that the oil prices are so low, crude, and everything is so low, most ethanol plants have shut their doors. They're not buying corn right now.
And while the soybean market looked promising after a trade deal with China in January, it wasn't the boost farmers were hoping to see because China is now buying at a price driven down by the trade war itself.
So if they're buying $6 soybeans or $7 soybeans, they're getting a lot more bushels, a lot more volume for their dollar. We would have hoped it to be up to $10, $11, $12 for us to be profitable.
As Americans have reacted to the hit that this crisis has had on their personal finances, farmers will tell you this has been their reality for the last 3 years.
We've taken a 50% loss over the past 3 years, so it's just hard to sustain. I mean, we're burning, my dad's 75 years old. We've had to take loans out on the farm now to keep operating, stuff that was paid off, we're burning into his equity now. He's worked his whole life for this, and we're burning into his equity now just to stay operating.
Unfortunately, he said they had equity built up to burn through to see them through this process until things turn around, something that a lot of farmers don't have the luxury of doing. With Democracy 2020, I'm John Kosich. Enjoy your Sunday. Stay safe.